The room was filled with laughter, but his eyes carried a smirk sharper than a blade. He leaned forward, tilting his head, and asked her rank, half joke, half dismissal. She froze. A flicker of amusement crossed his face, unaware of the storm he had just provoked. The fluorescent lights reflected off polished medals she no longer wished to flaunt, each one a story he had never bothered to hear. A heartbeat later, silence stretched long and heavy, like the pause before a gunshot. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" she whispered, almost to herself. He laughed, dismissing her, thinking authority was measured by ego, by volume, by intimidation. But the room shifted. Eyes narrowed. A single step echoed against the cold tile floor, a sound heavier than any insult. What if the one you mocked held the power to shatter everything you assumed about yourself? Tension coiled around him like a living thing, tightening with every passing second. Sweat formed, not from fear, but from the realization that he had underestimated the storm he had triggered. The air grew thick. Every breath felt charged, every glance a verdict. And when she finally revealed her truth, the rank he had laughed at, time seemed to stop, the weight of consequence pressing against his chest. Because sometimes, the ones we dismiss as jokes carry the authority to rewrite the rules, and the shock is the lesson we never saw coming. Rain streaked the glass windows of the command center, blurring the city lights into trembling rivers of gold and red. The hum of fluorescent bulbs overhead mingled with the distant rumble of thunder, a low growl that seemed to echo the tension inside the room. Outside, the streets were empty, the sidewalks slick with water, each puddle reflecting a distorted version of the towering city skyline. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished metal and old coffee, a mixture of discipline and fatigue. Desks sat in perfect alignment, but the quiet felt unnatural, too heavy, too expectant. Footsteps on the polished floor echoed in the corners, each tap a punctuation in the silence. No one spoke, yet the atmosphere vibrated with unspoken challenges, rivalries, and judgments that had been brewing long before she entered the building. The commander's office loomed at the end of the hall, glass walls separating him from the rest of the team. Shadows danced across the floor as the occasional lightning flash illuminated the medals and plaques on the walls, each one a story of valor, but also a reminder of failures quietly hidden behind pride. Outside, the wind tugged at the flag on the rooftop, a muted salute that seemed to whisper warnings she could already feel in her bones. Every chair, every paper, every empty cup seemed frozen in expectation, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The low murmur of the ventilation system became a heartbeat, slow and deliberate, marking the seconds before confrontation. The scent of wet asphalt mingled with the faint, metallic tang of tension, settling over the room like a heavy curtain. Even the digital clocks seemed to tick with hesitation, time stretching longer than it should, drawing the air tight with anticipation. A single droplet of rain tapped the window, startling in its clarity, a tiny signal that something irreversible was about to unfold. Her reflection in the glass caught the flicker of neon from the street below. Strong, composed, almost serene. But the storm outside mirrored the undercurrent of unease within. Somewhere in the silence, a chair creaked, the whisper of a door closing, the faint sigh of a colleague leaning back, each sound a subtle prelude to the chaos she knew was coming. The room was beautiful, orderly, and disciplined, but also cruelly deceptive. Calm, yes, but only the kind of calm that hides a hurricane, waiting for a single spark to turn restraint into reckoning. She entered the room with measured steps, each footfall a silent announcement. Her uniform pressed perfectly against her frame, insignias gleaming faintly under the fluorescent lights, but it was her posture that demanded attention, rigid, unyielding, yet effortless. Every movement spoke of years spent in discipline, of battles fought both on the field and within the strict hierarchy of the Marines. She didn't need to speak. The room already took notice. Across the polished floor, the commander lounged in his leather chair, fingers drumming lightly on the mahogany desk. A smirk played on his lips, one eyebrow raised in amusement, his tone sharp as he addressed her. He was used to authority bending at his word, to power measured by ego and intimidation. Yet there was a flicker in his eyes now, curiosity, perhaps suspicion, but it passed almost too quickly to catch. Nearby, a junior officer shuffled papers nervously, careful to avoid direct eye contact with either of them. His movements were efficient, mechanical even, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed the silent storm about to break. He was an observer, a witness to a moment that would ripple far beyond the walls of this command center. The air shifted as she stopped a few feet from the desk, hands loosely clasped behind her back. There was calm in her gaze, an unshakable confidence that neither arrogance nor threat could touch. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was measured, almost soft, but it cut through the space with the precision of a blade. "You asked my rank," she said, letting the words linger, drawing out the pause like a subtle warning. The commander chuckled at first, leaning back, convinced this was a game he was winning. But the room seemed to contract around her presence, the hum of the lights and the distant storm outside amplifying the growing tension. Every small detail mattered, the tilt of his head, the tightening of his jaw, the faint tapping of his fingers as if counting down to an inevitable reckoning. She moved slightly, shifting her weight with deliberate grace, and the medals on her chest caught the light. Each one was a testament, a silent narrative of resilience, strategy, and unyielding authority. Without raising her voice, she commanded the room, asserting control not through fear, but through presence. For the first time, the commander felt the weight of someone who could match, even surpass, his carefully constructed dominance. The subtle dance of power had begun, measured in glances, breaths, and the invisible pressure of discipline. And somewhere beneath the tension, the storm outside seemed to echo the unspoken question hanging in the air. Could he withstand what he had just provoked? The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows, each drop striking like a ticking clock counting down to inevitability. Inside, the room remained eerily still, but the air felt charged, almost suffocating. She stood firm, her gaze locked on the commander, who shifted in his chair, the familiar smirk now fading into something closer to unease. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers interlaced. "You're not what I expected," he said, his voice carefully neutral, yet carrying the subtle edge of disbelief. His eyes darted briefly to the medals she wore, then quickly back to her face. There was humor in the question, but beneath it, a flicker of caution, a recognition he wasn't ready to admit aloud. She tilted her head slightly, a single eyebrow rising. "And what exactly were you expecting?" Her tone was soft, almost casual, but each word landed with deliberate weight. The hum of the ventilation system and the muted thunder outside emphasized the silence between them, stretching seconds into what felt like minutes. A junior officer in the corner shuffled, clearing his throat. He tried to speak, tried to break the tension, but her presence made the smallest sound feel intrusive, almost disrespectful. The commander noticed but ignored it, his attention consumed entirely by her. He straightened, a forced chuckle escaping. "I asked your rank as a joke," he said, leaning back, attempting to reclaim the upper hand. His body language screamed confidence, yet there was hesitation in the movement of his shoulders, the quick glance away, the subtle tightening of his jaw. Her expression remained unreadable. A single finger tapped lightly on the desk, not impatiently, not threateningly, but with the calm certainty of someone who knew the power of a pause. "Was it funny?" she asked, letting her words hover in the charged air. The room seemed to inhale with the question, holding it like a secret that refused to be spoken aloud. The commander opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I didn't. I mean," he stopped mid-sentence, realizing the usual arsenal of ego, intimidation, and humor no longer applied. He was no longer the center of authority here. The dynamic had shifted imperceptibly, yet completely. Her posture softened almost imperceptibly, a subtle sign that she could have stepped forward or withdrawn entirely. Instead, she waited. The tension in her body was a silent force, speaking louder than any raised voice could. The storm outside roared in agreement, a natural crescendo to the mounting unease. Then, finally, she revealed the truth, the rank he had mocked. The words were simple, factual, almost understated, but they hit like thunder, echoing through the room, the walls, the polished floor. The smirk vanished from his face. His chair groaned as he leaned back, pale, breath-catching, the laughter gone. A single, almost imperceptible shiver ran through him. And in that moment, the inciting spark ignited, the first real fracture in the hierarchy, the subtle yet undeniable proof that authority could not be assumed, only earned or recognized. The room fell into a tense, measured silence. Outside, the storm raged as if echoing the unspoken battle inside. Rain splattered against the windows in relentless rhythm, each strike a subtle percussion to the mounting weight of the moment. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting shadows that stretched across the polished floor like dark fingers, creeping closer with each passing second. The commander's hands tightened around the edges of his desk, knuckles white, though he still attempted to mask it with a casual lean. His ego, normally a fortress of confidence and dominance, was under siege, not by words alone, but by the presence of someone whose authority could not be shaken. His voice, when it emerged, was clipped, cautious, almost brittle. I didn't realize, he began, but the words stumbled, losing momentum. He leaned back, attempting to reassert control with the casual smirk he had worn all his career. Yet she didn't flinch, didn't yield. Every subtle movement, every measured glance she cast, reinforced the imbalance that had quietly taken root. She allowed a pause, letting the silence swell and stretch. Her eyes, steady and unblinking, mirrored the storm outside, calm yet unstoppable, disciplined yet impossible to ignore. Then, almost imperceptibly, she shifted her weight, a subtle gesture of dominance not loud or brash, but deliberate. Her presence alone recalibrated the room. "You thought this was a joke," she said softly, each word deliberate, precise. "That your position, your experience, your rank, your ego, could shield you from accountability." The commander blinked, attempting to mask the sudden unease. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. There were no words that could restore the balance now. He had underestimated her not because she lacked experience, but because he had assumed his perception of authority was absolute. It was the most dangerous kind of hubris, one that assumed everyone else existed only to support the illusion of dominance. Around them, the other officers shifted uneasily. Some pretended to focus on files or monitors, but their glances betrayed recognition. The room's hierarchy was no longer what it had been. The subtle currents of power had changed, quietly but irreversibly. She stepped closer, each movement slow and deliberate, a demonstration of control not earned through intimidation but through presence, integrity, and calm certainty. "You see," she continued, "real authority isn't claimed through jokes, or threats, or bluster. It's demonstrated in every decision, every action, every standard you uphold, even when no one is watching." He flinched as her words struck with the force of truth. His mind raced, attempting to grasp how the dynamic had shifted so completely, how the balance of power, once assumed, had been exposed as fragile. Pride, the cornerstone of his confidence, now pressed heavily against the walls of his chest. He realized that authority without accountability was empty, and the consequences were already unfolding. The storm outside softened, rain now a steady hum, as if the world itself acknowledged the gravity of the moment. Every subtle gesture in the room, the tightening of a hand on a chair, the straightening of a uniform, the quiet intake of breath, marked the slow erosion of old assumptions. He leaned back further, a subtle surrender, acknowledging the weight of someone who had never needed to raise her voice, yet had spoken volumes. He stammered, but the words dissolved under the magnitude of recognition. Integrity, competence, and command had revealed themselves, not in flamboyance, but in quiet, deliberate authority. She allowed herself a fraction of a smile, not triumphant, but knowing, the calm certainty of someone who understood that true power doesn't need to prove itself with ego. It simply exists. For a brief moment, the room exhaled collectively, the tension folding into understanding. The power shift was complete, not through humiliation, but through exposure, reflection, and undeniable truth. He had been forced to confront the limits of his assumptions, the fragility of unchecked pride. And in that confrontation, the real lesson revealed itself. Authority is not inherited, it is earned, and it cannot be mocked without consequence. The storm outside finally began to ease, the city lights returning to shimmer through the softened rainfall. Inside, the room remained charged, but no longer tense. The battle of presence, ego, and principle had concluded. One life lesson had been delivered, quietly but with unstoppable force. Those who assume dominance without integrity will always meet someone who embodies it effortlessly. The commander, silent and pale, leaned back in his chair. And for the first time, he understood that the joke had been on him all along. The room was quiet now, but the silence was heavy, thick with recognition. The commander leaned back, hands gripping the edges of his desk, eyes narrowing, not with anger, but with dawning comprehension. The storm outside had slowed to a rhythmic patter, each drop a muted echo of the truth sinking in. She stood unmoved, her posture perfect, her gaze steady. There was no boast, no triumph in her stance, only calm, deliberate authority. Every medal on her chest, every crease in her uniform, every subtle gesture spoke of experience and integrity that could not be questioned. She didn't need to raise her voice. The room already understood her command. "You thought my rank was a joke," she said softly, the words carrying the weight of measured certainty. "But authority isn't given by title alone. It's shown in every decision, every action, every standard upheld. Even when no one is watching." He swallowed hard, the words striking deeper than any reprimand could. For the first time, he felt the limits of his ego. Pride, once his shield, now pressed against him like a weight too heavy to carry. He realized that respect cannot be demanded, it must be recognized. And in her presence, he could no longer hide behind assumptions or bravado. The junior officers around them shifted subtly, sensing the shift in air, the invisible recalibration of hierarchy. The room itself seemed to exhale, tension folding into clarity. The commander's eyes flicked to the medals, then back to her, and finally, he understood. It was not a challenge, nor a confrontation. It was a demonstration of quiet strength. No jokes, no threats, no displays of ego could alter the undeniable truth she embodied. Discipline, competence, and integrity formed a force far greater than arrogance or presumption. He leaned back further, a slow, reluctant acknowledgement settling over him. The weight of his assumptions, the casual dismissal of her abilities, was now undeniable. In that instant, the shift was complete. The power he had assumed was gone, replaced by respect, reflection, and the quiet sting of humility. And she, unflinching and composed, allowed the moment to linger, letting the lesson speak for itself. No victory needed to be announced. The truth alone carried its weight. The storm had passed entirely, leaving the city streets gleaming under the soft wash of streetlights. Inside the command center, the air was still, no longer tense but charged with a quiet clarity. The commander sat in his chair, shoulders slumped, staring at the desk as if it held the answers he had failed to see. His ego, bruised and humbled, no longer dictated the room. She moved calmly toward the door, each step deliberate, measured, controlled. Her presence no longer challenged him. It defined the space, leaving an imprint of authority and integrity that could not be erased. Around her, the junior officers watched in silent acknowledgement, realizing that respect was earned through action, not assumed by title. A colleague finally broke the silence, voice low but respectful. "Sir, I think we all understand now." The commander nodded slowly, the weight of the lesson settling into him. The laughter, the arrogance, the casual dismissal, gone, replaced by reflection and a newfound awareness of limits and responsibility. Later, in the formal halls of review and protocol, the story unfolded quietly. There were no dramatic accusations, no public spectacle. Integrity had been the measure, and it required only observation, diligence, and calm authority to make its case. Her rank, once the subject of ridicule, now commanded the respect it had always deserved. The commander, faced with undeniable truth, could no longer cling to pretense. Accountability had arrived not through confrontation, but through recognition. Even the storm outside had left a lingering effect. Windows glistened with raindrops, reflections of lights refracting like fractured authority realigned. The room itself seemed cleaner, clearer, freer of assumptions and misjudgments. Lessons had been delivered silently, yet profoundly. Arrogance meets consequence, and true power shows itself through competence, discipline, and calm defiance. She paused in the doorway, turning slightly, letting the commander meet her gaze. No words were necessary. Everything had been said in posture, presence, and unshakable calm. Justice had been served, not through revenge or spectacle, but through truth and quiet demonstration. It was the kind of victory that did not need applause, for its impact resonated far beyond a single room, touching minds and reshaping perceptions. As she left, the lights flickered softly, echoing the shift that had occurred. The commander exhaled, finally accepting the weight of what had transpired. Lessons lingered, subtle but indelible, and the room, now still and quiet, carried the imprint of authority, integrity, and an enduring reminder. Underestimation has a cost, and recognition of true power is its own form of justice. Authority is not measured by laughter, smirks, or assumptions. It is revealed in discipline, integrity, and the quiet strength to act when no one is watching. The commander had assumed dominance came from rank alone, from ego unchecked and bravado unchallenged. He learned too late that true leadership does not demand recognition. It earns it, silently and consistently. She did not raise her voice. She did not flaunt her medals. Yet every action, every gesture, every calm glance conveyed what words could not. Authority grounded in competence commands respect far beyond the illusions of power. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence within the room, but while the weather subsided, the lesson endured. In the end, victory was not about humiliation or revenge. It was the quiet, undeniable proof that underestimation has a cost, and integrity always leaves a mark. Because sometimes, the ones we dismiss as jokes carry the authority to reshape the world around them. And the true measure of power is simple. It is recognized not in fear, but in respect. Leadership without integrity is empty. True authority whispers where arrogance shouts.